you're quite right. It was your son who was one of the co-founders of the Black Focus documentary uh, meetings, and honestly, I was really grateful that he did that because not only were the discussions one of my favorite things to do in life. You may have probably gotten this impression of me just from the presentations I've done with CBAC over the years. One of my favorite things to do is to discuss interesting topics with interesting people, and especially topics that are of particular concern to my community. And I was also glad to see us have a meeting place like that, a place where we could gather regularly just to socialize and interact with other people in the Black community. One thing that I've learned over the years is that one of the conditions that distinguishes Canadian Black communities from American ones is that in the States, and I can say this partly from having lived in the States almost half my adult life so far, um, and having lived in Black neighborhoods to be precise, there's this history of racial segregation in housing, particularly in American cities. That while it was very horrific in terms of creating this network of urban ghettos across the United States, what I often call America's ghetto archipelago, at the same time, one probably the main silver lining to that dark cloud was that it created geographic spaces within American cities where Black people could and did congregate, mainly because they had no choice, but it at least enabled a certain amount of solidarity between Black people as a result of the fact that they were concentrated in the same neighborhoods. And that has been less of a phenomenon in Canadian history. There was largely, I would say, because of the smaller Black populations up here, there's been less of an effort by governments here to try to sort of sequester Black communities away from other populations in major Canadian cities. And as a result, we tend to be a bit more scattered geographically than Black communities in the States. And that has made it a bit more of a challenge in many ways for us to come together and build a political, social, and economic power base. Whereas, and that's really why I felt like it was valuable to have regular meetings like the Black Focus documentary meetings, because it really did bring many like-minded Black people, particularly young Black people here in Montreal, together on a regular basis. And honestly, it even reminds me of the experience I had when I was living in New York City a decade ago, going to law school, because I went to a Jewish law school that's part of a Jewish university in New York City, Cardozo Law School at Yeshiva University. And let me tell you, I learned so much from going to law school in the Jewish community, because I learned even more than I had known before about the institutions that the Jewish community has set up internally, things that most non-Jews know little or nothing about, and institutions that enable young Jews in particular to interface with each other. When they go to random parts of the world, they can find organizations like Chabad that provide them various services, helping them to deal with local embassies if they're traveling as tourists or what have you. And enabling them to engage in religious worship and things of that nature. And I heard my young Jewish classmates talk about how valuable these institutions were to them. And finally, I learned about certain endeavors that they've set up to encourage their younger generations to stay close to their roots. So, for example, I remember talking to one of my schoolmates who was a year behind me in law school, but we were both members of the Moot Court Honor Society. That was our main extracurricular activity. And I remember she told me that she and her roommates, remember this is Manhattan, right? So the rents are high. She told me that she and her roommates got their rent subsidized by a Jewish community organization, not by any government, private, non-governmental Jewish community organization. And I said, wow, that's pretty cool. What's the catch? There's got to be some catch. And she says, oh, there's a catch. Here's the catch. In exchange for the money they give us every month to defray the cost of our rent, we are required, by contractually obligated, to throw at least one social event every month in our apartment for young Jews from the New York City area, in order to just social mixers, to enable and encourage young Jews to mingle with each other and to interface with each other. And that's it. And I said, that's the only catch? You guys, in exchange for getting your rent subsidized, the only price you have to pay is you have to throw at least one house party every month? And she said, yep, that's the catch. And I said, that is sweet. And I remember
Come
thinking to myself,
in.
imagine if we had something, anything remotely like that in the black community. You know what I mean? So that is, that was one of those things that really stuck with me from my experience, my many experiences living in the States. And that's always the kind of mindset I have in mind whenever I approach Black History Month every year.